Well, hello, hello, and good Saturday, sundowner time for us in this part of the world, but wherever you are, I wanted to speak a little bit about trust. As some of you know, I've got the last 2-day live trust process workshop happening in Johannesburg next weekend, 13th and 14th in Kyalami, amongst incredible animals, donkeys, horses, goats, sheep, birds, dogs. They're all going to be there in support of us to really look at what we love and what we fear and to stop scaring ourselves silly. So I wanted to talk to this thing that comes up a lot, especially with new clients that are kind of feeling stuck, or they're bored, or they're just not feeling fulfilled. You know, what they're doing doesn't light them up. And maybe you can relate to that. Give me a yes if you can, because oftentimes this is the biggest struggle, is this perception of I don't have enough meaning in my life. I'm not living into my true potential because I haven't found my purpose yet. And this is where I think let's get straight to the truth of it. What if purpose is doing the best with what you have, doing what you're doing, whether that's caring for your elderly parents, whether that is growing your children? That is your purpose in the moment. So why not enjoy the process and know that that is purpose for now? It's not a fixed thing. It's a big, moving, beautiful, messy experiment. So, just a little bit more on this process of trust. Does it make sense that you, in order to really live aligned in your purpose, you have to trust that you're enough to begin with, to understand your roles and your relationships with what purpose means to your life? It has to be deeply rooted in trust, trusting in your infinite capacities and gifts and talents and what your learned experiences are, what your life experience has been, what your story is. Because purpose, once you can trust that is rich and beautiful and moving, and that your story might inspire somebody else. Purpose is the anchor. Think of it like an anchor. It's a lifeline for you to stay focused and grounded in a place of clarity, especially when life gets chaotic. So the mastery, the training, is to show up in presence, in patience, in persistence, in compassionate listening to the parts of you that are afraid first, and trusting that you have everything that you need through your PhD of life experiences. You have everything that you need, and you are surrounded by people who can support you with the pieces that you don't know. So it's knowing what you know, and trusting that what you know is what you know for now, and that you will know what you don't know by asking generative questions, asking for support, not thinking you have to figure it all out on your own. And I think this is why I love the work with animals, because as much as we will show up because we want to support our animals in living good, happy, healthy lives, they are just this most beautiful gateway. They're like this bridge between heaven and earth, especially horses, who always mirror back to us our lies and our limitations of self-harm and labels and judgments that we place on ourselves, so that we can get present with the opportunity to just be open in our vulnerability, in our rawness, in our purpose. I'm looking at my dog sitting here going, you guys talk too much. Why don't you just, what if the whole purpose of living is to play, is to lighten up, is to see beauty in the things that may initially feel not beautiful, in sending love to the places where you are being unloving with yourself, with others, whatever it is for you. That's where purpose becomes the anchor. Okay, and my dogs agree. Purpose is an energy, as I said, just like you are moving, living, breathing energy in a bodysuit. so that you can experience life through the beauty of the five senses that are endowed on us as living, breathing, feeling animal bodies with a prefrontal cortex that puts us into fear every time we think we're actually excited. So this is a really good question to ask when you feel a little bit of butterflies coming up in your stomach, or you're feeling like you're hesitating, is to get curious and look at, am I actually afraid of something here? And is it, at what is the age of the part that is hesitating, that is doubtful, that is distrusting, that is not, that is slightly intimidated? And also ask, is it fear or is it actually excitement? Because your nervous system and your water element, your kidneys, your bladder, which are all around existential fear and control, the brain doesn't know the difference between fear and excitement. In fact, there's such a fine line between that, just like there is such a fine line between love and unlove, right? Not the opposite. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is unlove. So we're looking at that and looking at how you can use purpose as your greatest ally. Right? It's an intention. It's, where am I putting my intention? Where am I putting my focus? You hear people talk about being aligned to your North Star. We talk about the North Node in spiritual astrology as what you dreamed into being when you incarnated into this body to achieve and contribute to in the world and in your own evolution and experience. The South Node is where you've been in your past lives, what your experiences have been. And that's normally the default pattern that we move into when we're aiming for our North Star. So, using purpose as an anchor is very different. When you look at this as a grounding rod or as a bridge between bringing heaven, right, the life you are dreaming into being in earth. When you're doubting yourself or you're losing your focus on your path because you're being distracted, or you're delaying and procrastinating things because it feels like it's the easy way or the cop out to not fail. So what if there is no failure in purpose? There's just mistakes where you take something, you try it on, you feel, how does it feel in my body? Does it light me up? Does it expand me? Or does it make me feel heavy? And if it makes you feel heavy, knowing this is not true for you and moving on to the next with fluidity and flow and resilience and purpose. That's growth. That's training. Okay, there are no mistakes. It's just taking something and deciding if you like it, or if it works for you, or if it's aligned, or if it's not. You won't know until you try. And that way of aligning the imagined state, right, the future that you want to see, with this beautiful, moving, living, breathing body that carries you through the experience toward what you want rather than what you don't want. And this is what you need to have. You need to have the trust in place first, to trust that everything is there to grow you and everything is there to support you. Trust in a beneficent universe, a friendly universe, not a hostile one. Because remember, what you focus your attention on only amplifies. So if you're using all this brain power and all this rumination and thinking process to try and figure out where you're going and what you want in your life, you have to get really honest with why you want what you want, right? Before you can understand the what, to get the how, you need to know what motivates you to move that. What is it costing you or your family members or your loved ones to stay stuck? How will you feel a year from now being in the same place that you were today because you were too afraid to move? And I think this is how you use purpose. It's not linear, it's not static, it's fluid, and it's evolving as we evolve. And when we know our purpose, then we can get really clear in our place in the world, because the belonging, which is also misconstrued, is that you're not belonging to something outside of you. The longing is for you to be in body, to be in trust, to have faith, to have grace, to stay as a player, right? The authority of your own life, not a follower. You're not a sheep, right? We are, once you're awake, you cannot go back to sleep. You have to move and expand and move and expand, and know that the journey is not like this. It goes like this and all over the place. We all know that. And when we move through our fears and those places of insecurity and the doubt that prevent us from tuning in and listening to our deep down, to our heart, to our guts knowing, to the innate intelligence of our body, mind, wisdom, everything starts to change. That's where the alchemy happens, because you're an alchemist. And this is where you gain clarity through investing your time and your money and your commitment to trust more through the trust process. And where horses can be such an incredible teacher in showing us where purpose is speaking deeply into us. So if you're a woman or a man that finds yourself in transition, that's yearning for a deeper understanding and an awareness of what your purpose is, of what your gifts or your talents are, and you're asking for a good dose of courage to go with it, I invite you to come and join us. Come and join us next weekend, because oftentimes when you surround yourself with people that are aligned with their own truth and are trusting their own intuition, and they are moving towards the things that they care about, you realize you're not alone anymore. And here's the thing, you've always been an alchemist. You are a creative alchemist. You're born knowing that you can turn anything into gold, right? We come from the golden planet. We knew how to do this before we shut it down because of the programming and all the vibrations and virtual reality shock and trauma systems to hook you into this fear cycle to keep you sick, right? You're feeding multi-billion-dollar industries in one way, shape, or form. And if you're passionate about how to create more magic and abundance and flow, you have to learn to be unwavering in your trust of your abilities, of your body to take you where it needs to go, of your support system, that it's going to be there when you stumble, when you to make sure that they hold you accountable, that you don't quit at the first obstacle. And if you've been struggling to find that authentic voice or to express your deepest truths in a creative, soulful way that really, really connects you with your body, with your vision, with your mission, with your purpose, with your tribe, come and learn the trust process with us. And since you and I are here having this sort of virtual sundowner together, or your tea or your chai or whatever, let me give you a little bit of fierce medicine, little pep talk around this thing of fear and how you dance with the shadows. Because deep down, fear is an incredible indicator that you're either very close to your truth, or that there's some unresolved trauma that needs to be resolved and integrated and synchronized, and that the only thing that's standing in the way of your expansion is you, right? The power of choice is yours. Nobody can take that away from you. And I've asked so many of my clients who are intuitive healers and empaths and creators and dog behaviorists and horse, whatever, they're creative and they're entrepreneurs and they have a desire to serve in a bigger way. And if you're here with us, you know that because you've been part of this tribe for a while. And the number one obstacle that most people stands in their way of trusting in their most authentic and inspired creative self-expression of their unfolding, of their becoming, the one block, guess what it is that they can't break through? That one enemy that they always come in thinking that that it's impossible to use that in a good way. And if you're saying fear in your head, you're absolutely right. And I get it. It does require bravery. It does require courage to speak with a whole heart, to be brave, to go where nobody else has gone, to lead through the courage of your own convictions and your own truth, and to trust, right down to your spidey senses and the pit of your stomach, that wonder of your own human experience. And it's common, there's not a lot of fears out there. As a child, when you're born into the world, there's only two things: fear of starving and fear of falling. That's it. And when we grow older and we start comparing and we start engaging with the world in a bigger way, it becomes, what will other people think of me? What if I get judged? And underneath that is this fear of abandonment, this fear of rejection, because we need eyes on us. We need tribe in order to feel safe. But we have to bring our own piece of creating safety to ourselves in order to be encapsulated in the tribal truths of, I've got you. You can rest now. Right? You see this in herds of prey animal. Some of the horses will lie down and sleep. The others stand sentry. They stand guard. You can't always be in the front. Look at birds that kind of fly in the slipstream. They all have a chance to take the lead so that they can rest and restore on each other's strengths. That's a world that's a win-win, right? It's collaboration. It's cooperation. It's mutual regard. It's mindful trust of each other. And this is, again, where animals are so powerful in showing us our soul purpose and our soul contracts and what we've come here to do. And when we do that, there is no fear of failure. There is no fear of greatness or success either. I mean, that's a pretty crazy one. The fear of having too much money, because that's a crazy one too. But so many people that do up level and go from one target and grow that and 10 times it and 10 times it, there's always this fear of more responsibility, more work to be done, more taxes to be paid, more people to employ. Another one is fear of being seen, of meeting our true selves in the eyes of another, right? Because we have those mirror neurons to see the parts and pieces of ourselves that we love and the parts that we don't in other people. Those are the people that trigger us, or, those are the people that we're just drawn to and we don't know why, but there's a magnetic presence about them that is that attraction to the parts of ourselves that we recognize in that. And this is where life gets really, really beautiful. So it doesn't matter what you're afraid of. It's beyond the illusions and the masks the world has imposed and impelled and forced on you since birth. This is where we do the shedding of the skins through trust. And even though the details differ in each case, the diagnosis, the prognosis, the conclusionary reality that we all come to, regardless of what it is that we're afraid of in the moment, always has to do around loss, the fear of losing something. And it's just like, well, what if you gain more? In some cases, we need to lose, to get rid of, to eliminate, to surrender parts and pieces of our own fragmented psyche that no longer support us in our evolution, and also other people, ideas, concepts, beliefs, outdated modalities, whatever it is. Just know, stop scaring yourself sick. The good news is it's all temporary. And fear, just like depression, just like any of those other sort of very, very intense frequency vibrations, are all there to show us, oops, I need to look at something. Something is out of place. Something's out of balance. Then fear doesn't shorten your life because you're not scaring yourself sick anymore. You're using fear as fuel, right? What is it? False evidence appearing real. and perhaps not in years, but in intensity, in creative opportunities, in soul expansion, in right relationship, in joy, in life experiences, in truth. The hot, burning, beautiful, bright truth is always based in trust. And fear is making you less than who you are, and infinitely less than who you know you came here to be. So again, I can go into depth on this, and I have in other videos, but just for today, we're not talking about rational fear, which is healthy fear. We're talking about irrational fear, the what ifs, worst case scenarios that we come up with. And oftentimes, when I've kind of gone back and looked at some of my old stories and how many times I allowed fear and doubt to keep me back from my next level of expansion or my next level of growth. I've done that. I did that for the first 3 decades of my life. I was terrified all the time, even though I didn't show it on the outside. It literally caught up with my body, and I scared myself sick to the point of suicide. And I've probably left more undone out of fear and doubt than all I've ever done out of love. And that still has a bit of a sting to it, but it's great because I know it now. Is there regret? Of course, we're always going to have some regret, but as always, the calls of fear don't let you expand into what is possible. So whatever shape your fear takes, whatever project or person or decision, your fear is keeping you from living fully alive, right? How many people do you see that are protecting a life that they're not living? They're dying slowly inside, trying to protect assets and accumulation of stuff that doesn't fulfill them, of yourself, of others, because anything that requires your heart's investment, your soul's calling, also demands your vulnerability. We have to see ourselves as this open wound and rub salt in it. That's the intensity of life. And yet we've been taught to avoid it at all costs because it's going to hurt. And there's a difference between intensity and hurt. And I go into this in detail in a lot of my private coaching but for now, let's just stick to now. Otherwise I can go on and on and on. Just know that, and this sounds cliche, isn't it? There's that saying that says better to have loved and lost than to never have known love at all. And I think that the truth is that you risk that kind of heart shattering brokenness and leaking out, which I suppose some people could say is a loss. But the loss is not necessarily negative. Many times, in fact, most of the time, it brings the exact opposite. The inside of that is that, yes, you lose living a life that's killing you. You lose your smallness, your inability to thrive and expand because you're not willing to play small game anymore. You're committing to show up and do whatever it takes at all costs. You lose your ego so that you meet your soul. You begin to employ the ego. You never lose your ego, but you employ your ego to work for you, just like you employ your mind to work for your soul. You lose the need to try and control things that are not yours to control, so that you can find more flow and more compassion and more love for those people that are perhaps being impossible. And you see your territorial self, right? The one that's defending the old ways is blindsided by the truth of who you're being. All it does is go through the motions of grabbing life by the throat. At every sign of change or expansion, you have to push outside the comfort zone. And of course, it's going to push back. Whatever part of you is still afraid, which is why the work with the mindfulness change process is so powerful once you've established trust, right? By doing the mindfulness process work and meeting your child parts at the age that they were when they created the belief or attitude that they weren't enough, that they couldn't be trusted with money because they lost their money, they took money on the way too, and your parents screamed at you and said you were irresponsible and you couldn't be trusted with money. Wherever that seed of creation was, right, the root cause of what creates you to function in the world as a grown-up now, we work through that from the perspective and the voice and the conversation with the child that still believes that to be true about them. And you become the secure adult that creates the safety through loving, compassionate attachment, not codependency that's needy, to grow those child parts up from trust, right? Reestablishing trust, because trust's been broken some way. And because as an imperfect or as limiting as it may be, any of that, your current reality is all that you can see in front of you. And yet, you're so much greater than what you can visibly see or touch or feel in this moment. This is why we always want to look at, who am I being? What do I perceive? What can I realize from an imagined state? And imagination is how the law of attraction works. It's how the law of compensation and reciprocity and abundance and circulation all come from, is this intrinsic sense of trust that this is bigger than you, this is bigger than all of us. And then we can step into that place and make a difference and get resourceful if we don't have resources to do the work we know we need to do. You cannot deny it anymore. So, being as imperfect or as limiting as any of it may be, when you begin to feel manipulated or shut down by your fear, your first step is to recognize that that is what it is. If it is true, is it your fear? Remember those questions I asked. Is it mine? Who does this belong to? Is this fear or is it excitement? What is underneath the fear? And you'll probably give yourself a litany or a list of stuff that you think fear is from a rational standpoint. And then you'll get to something super simple that was formed pre-3-year-old, pre-7-year-old, right? Before the world imprinted all the fear on you. And then you can start to integrate and bring those parts home and come into a place of allowance where you can embrace yourself in it as part of this mystery called life. So you're afraid. So what? So is the whole damn world, as I said. Welcome to planet Earth, the insane asylum we're all committed to and nobody knows it. That is where fear is a side effect of living that has become multi-billion-dollar fear-based industry. Life insurance, death insurance, medical insurance. Everywhere you look, we're being sold fear as a driver. So flip it around. Because ultimately, when you know what's truly a part of you, an idea, a person, a situation, a way of life, all of it, when you try and distinguish whether the fear is truly protecting you from a real danger, right? Rational fear, or is it irrational? Is it made up? Is it coming from the territorial self, from the story of the last time that you got hurt, or you were really, really afraid because maybe your life was threatened? It's a real possibility living in South Africa. Life is a dangerous place. We leave our electric fence, 6-foot walls, and our panic buttons around our necks and our guard dogs, and we go out, and there is a very, very deeply ingrained collective consciousness of, I am frightened for my life, whether we know it or not. Most of people have become normalized to think that's normal. It is so not normal. But I digress into other trauma work. But when you can see what it is you're resisting, what are you afraid to lose? Where am I protecting my old identity because I'm afraid that if I change, people will leave me, right? We come back to loss all the time, which keeps you in that perpetuated cycle of feast and famine, loss and betrayal, all of it, when it could be the opposite, the inside of that. Make sense? So just remember, change is the dynamic of life. We're meant to change. That's how we grow. Our body is not a constant. It's constantly shape-shifting and changing. The cells are communicating all the time. We are part of a dynamic system called life, called nature. We're not separate from that. And when we come and go, parts of us die so that new parts can come into the fore. That's really all we do. And I don't even like to use the term death because we don't ever truly die. Every stage is transitional. And yes, the one certainty is that at some point we're all going to transition out of our human bodysuits and evolve into another shape of matter and energy. So don't be afraid of losing all the lies that need to be lost, the stories that are not true for you anymore. I want you to not be afraid. I want you to be aware of not what it's going to cost you to not find the burning truth, that in the depth of your screams when you're, in dream state, or sobbing on the bathroom floor, or whatever it is. And we're not talking about extremities. We're talking about this and that and everything in between. But when you can see it for what it is, and you can be honest and true to yourself, you can't lose what you no longer are. And it's pretty difficult to lose yourself. Yes, we separate from our body when things get tough. We leave our body to have the abuse and the hard time, and we watch. We're infinite. We know that. And what is truly yours will never leave you. You cannot lose yourself. So see fear as fuel. See fear as something to get excited about, because it means you're really, really close. And don't let it hold you back. Let it transform through you. Experience life through you. Let it become a really, really clear indication of where you want to be going. There's no other way. It's a non-negotiable. Keep your appointments with yourself. Stay committed. Say yes when opportunity comes your way. Even if there's doubt or hesitation, get curious about it, but say yes first. Write your permission slip. Okay? I don't think fear ever really goes away because it's built in as part of our mammalian body, animal body. It has a great purpose when we're utilizing it as fuel, not scaring ourselves sick with it. And just remember that, you are trustworthy. You have everything that you need. Trust it, even if it feels like you don't. And stop blocking love until you learn to give yourself the emotional support and the kindness and the empathy and the forgiveness and the compassion that you came in here deserving, right? The Latin deserve comes from the word of service. You came in service into this body at this time. You don't need to prove it. You wouldn't be here if you were not in this world to serve, to be served, to give and to receive. And when you block from love, instead of being able to flow and receive love, that's the opposite of what you came here to do. And the matrix is like this beautiful garden. And if we can stay aware, what seeds are we planting? Are we watering our garden? Are we tending to the root system? Are we speaking love to the plants that we're growing? Then we can consciously and deliberately choose what seeds we plant. It's your garden and you're the alchemist. So whenever you sow a seed of compassion to yourself or to somebody else, the energy has to return. That's the law of divine compensation, right? When you love, when you forgive, when you nurture, when you honor and respect the self, you override the fear, the defensive programs that keep you from being able to experience true intimacy. Into me, see, I'm an open book. This is me. Real, raw, messy. Not knowing what I don't know, and knowing everything and knowing nothing. That's where alchemy happens. In all things, just keep sending yourself and others a transmission of love energy. Money is the highest vibrational form of love. And yet we give money a bad rap. It's not money. Money's neutral. It's what do you do with it when you have it? And when you do live from love, all those overriding old defensive programs that keep our egos in control, they have to find a new way of being. And I talk about this when we work in the trust process as realization learning, right? That's how we learn, from feedback. So love your ego, understand your ego, teach your ego, relax your ego, breathe compassion into it. It's part of you. Don't separate yourself into parts and pieces, because we talk about this great separation sickness that's out there, but it starts inside of our own bodies by scaring ourselves sick. So choose to transmit love energy back to times when you felt unloved, when you were confused about who you were, when you were experimenting with sexuality, when you were unsure about, what you wanted to be when you grew up, and when you were involved in maybe conflicting relationships, when you were self-sabotaging or condescending or judgmental, because your ego and your defensive systems were running the show from the pre-3-year-old that was having the temper tantrum because she thought she was going to be abandoned or left behind or lost. Upgrade your vibrations by deliberately and intentionally choosing to send love and light frequencies to those parts and pieces of you that have been feeling trapped in lower frequencies of thought and emotion, like fear and fear of abandonment and fear of rejection. It's your garden. You are the author of your own book. So what you sow, you reap. That's your birthright. You are an alchemist. You are the creator of your life. And if you don't create your life, someone else will create it for you. So I hope I've given you some food for thought. The sun is gone. It's dark outside. And wherever you are, remember, tread gently on yourself, on your soft-bodied animal parts. Tap into the wild horse woman within that knows how to be free. Tap into the wise sage. Tap into the innocence of the child that knows anything is possible. And go there. Go deep down. And hopefully I'll see you on the trust process next week. All right. Lots of love. Bye.